My husband didn't know my baby monitor was streaming when I left. What he said to his mistress. I kissed my son's forehead at 10:46 p.m., the same way I had every night since he was born. His tiny chest rose and fell beneath the blue mosquito net. "Sleep tight, Toby," I whispered. "Mummy loves you." The ceiling fan hummed above us, stirring the warm Lagos air. I lingered longer than usual, my thumb tracing the curl on his brow. I didn't know why my chest felt so heavy that night, like the world was waiting to break. Downstairs, the house smelled of fresh polish and betrayal. "Kay, I'm heading to the ward," I called. My voice echoed through our wide living room, bouncing off the marble floors we'd fought a bank to afford. "Okay," he said without looking up from his phone. Always that phone. 7 years of marriage, and my husband couldn't lift his eyes for more than 3 seconds. Once upon a time, he would stand in the doorway begging me not to take extra shifts. Now he barely noticed when I breathed. I straightened my nurse's uniform, checked my ID badge, and slung my handbag over my shoulder. My phone buzzed, a notification from the baby monitor app. I'd installed the new model 6 months earlier, a Rwandan brand with night vision and cloud streaming. Peace of mind for N32,000 a month. It sent automatic live alerts every time motion or sound registered. Before I left, I turned to him one last time. "Kay, remember Toby's syrup at midnight?" "Yeah, sure," he muttered, scrolling. Something in his tone chilled me. Flat, distracted, rehearsed. I brushed it off. We were struggling financially, I told myself. Stress made people distant. Outside, the generator from the neighbor's compound roared, drowning out the crickets. I slid into my beat-up Toyota, the leather seat hot against my thighs, and started the engine. By 11:15 p.m., I parked under the fluorescent lights of Lagos General's staff lot. The night shift stretched ahead, 12 hours of patience, paperwork, and exhaustion. Before stepping out, I did what I always did, opened the monitor app just to see Toby sleeping. The live feed flickered once, then sharpened into focus. And that's when my breath stopped. Toby's crib came into view first, peaceful. But the bedroom door was open, and Coyote stood there, shirtless, phone pressed to his ear. The monitor's audio clicked on automatically. "She just left," he whispered. 8 hours, baby. That's plenty. A woman's laugh floated through the tiny speaker. "You sure you can do it tonight?" "I told you. I've been putting the powder in her tea for 2 weeks. She keeps complaining of migraines. 1 more dose tomorrow morning and she won't wake up." The phone slipped in my hand. I barely caught it before it hit the dashboard. Powder, migraine, won't wake up. "Good," the woman purred. "Once she's gone, the life insurance money clears in 30 days. We can finally move to Cape Town. Toby can stay with my aunt for a bit until we sort our papers." Toby, my baby. My vision blurred. Sweat prickled behind my ears, even though the AC was running full blast. Coyote's tone was calm, businesslike. "You're sure the stuff is untraceable?" "Absolutely. Remember, I'm a pharmacist. She won't feel a thing." A small strangled sound escaped my throat. The app allowed me to record directly to the cloud. My fingers moved on instinct, years of nursing discipline, tap, record, save. The woman's name appeared when Coyote ended the call. Lara. Lara Akinsola. The same Lara who'd visited our house last Christmas, smiling like a saint, bringing vitamins for Toby. My colleague. My friend. For a full minute, I sat frozen, heartbeat hammering loud enough to drown out everything else. Then training took over. I dialed 112, Nigeria's emergency line. "Emergency response, what's your situation?" "My name is Dr. Nkechi Adebanjo. My husband just discussed poisoning me with his mistress. I have it on a live recording. My 2-year-old is in the house." The operator's tone shifted immediately. "Ma, stay on the line." "Are you in a safe location?" "Yes, I'm at the hospital parking lot. We're dispatching officers now. Stay connected." Through the feed, I saw Coyote walk toward Toby's crib. He adjusted the blanket, touched his cheek. My heart screamed, "Don't you dare touch him again." "Ma, please send the recording to this email," the dispatcher said. I forwarded it instantly. The screen flickered again, Kay pacing the living room, phone glued to his ear. "Tomorrow morning, love. Once she drinks it, it's done. We'll be free, free." My whole body shook. I whispered a prayer that felt more like a curse. Within minutes, the dispatcher told me the rapid response squad was approaching our street quietly. "Do not call him," she warned. "Do not alert him. Please, my son. They will get your son out safely, I promise." Through the camera, I saw flashes of movement at our front door. Then boom, the door burst inward. Uniforms flooded the living room. Coyote's expression, confusion, terror, guilt, burned itself into my mind forever. "Hands up! Don't move!" Toby began to cry upstairs. One female officer ran toward his room. Through the monitor, I watched her lift him gently, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Your mummy sent us." He sobbed harder. "Mummy!" "I'm coming, baby," I whispered to the empty car. "I'm coming." I reached the house 25 minutes later. The police van still idled outside. Blue lights washed our compound in ghostly color. A sergeant met me at the gate. "Madam, your husband is in custody." We secured the child. "Please come inside." The smell hit me first, gun oil and fear. The living room looked exactly the same, except Kay was gone. His phone lay on the table beside 2 mugs, one half filled with my favorite vanilla tea. The sergeant pointed. "We've sealed this for lab analysis." I nodded, throat tight. Toby reached for me from the female officer's arms. I crushed him against me, trembling so violently that she had to steady me. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, Ma. Didn't see anything." "Thank God." Detective Ebele, a tall woman with cropped hair and eyes that saw everything, approached with a calm authority that anchored the chaos. "Mrs. Adebanjo, I'm heading this investigation. We'll need your full statement tonight." I could barely speak. He was going to kill me." "Yes, Ma. We heard the recording." "It's solid evidence." She guided me to the sofa. My teacup, still warm, sat there like an accusation. I stared at it for a long time. If this story already has your heart racing, take a second to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Every story here is inspired by true-to-life horrors that remind us, sometimes evil hides right at home. Let's continue. I barely slept that night. Even after the police took Coyote away, I sat on the floor beside Toby's crib, watching him breathe, terrified that if I blinked, he might vanish too. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every shadow looked like Coyote's silhouette. By sunrise, the adrenaline had worn off. What replaced it was worse, silence. A silence that screamed. Detective Ebele returned at 8 a.m., crisp in her navy jacket, holding a folder thick with evidence. She looked at me the way a doctor looks at a patient who's survived the unthinkable. "Mrs. Adebanjo, we've got him. But I need you to brace yourself. There's more." She spread the photos across my dining table, screenshots, receipts, and WhatsApp messages. My kitchen table became a crime board of my own life. One image stopped my breath. Coyote and Lara at a beach resort in Lekki, his hands around her waist. The timestamp? 2 weeks after I had miscarried our first child. "Baby, she's so naive. Always trying to fix me. But you're the one who understands me." That was his text. My husband. Talking about me like a fool. I wanted to scream but couldn't. The sound stuck in my throat. Detective Ebele's voice cut through my fog. He was transferring money to her account for over a year. About $18 million in total. They were planning to move to Cape Town permanently. Your life insurance was the final piece. I stared at her. Why didn't I see it? He kissed me every morning. "People like him wear masks," she said quietly. "Until the day they slip." The police arranged for me to give a formal statement at the station. I arrived wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was gray. Anything to hide the swollen mess of my face. Coyote was already there, handcuffed, sitting beside his lawyer. When our eyes met, I swear for a second I saw the same charm that once made me fall for him. That easy, confident smile. But beneath it, something reptilian. "Baby," he said softly, as if we were still at home. "This is all a misunderstanding." I laughed, dry and sharp. "A misunderstanding? You tried to kill me, Coyote." The lawyer raised a hand. "Mrs. Adebanjo, my client claims this was a prank conversation, something his mistress said in anger." "He never intended harm." Ebele smirked from behind her clipboard. "A prank? Then why did we find sedatives, poison, and a signed life insurance application with forged medical results?" Coyote's jaw tightened. I leaned forward, voice trembling but steady. "You told her I'd be gone soon." "That's not a prank, that's a plan." He didn't reply. They took him away after my testimony. But the damage didn't end there. It never does. For the next few days, I lived like a ghost. Every corner of that house felt haunted by memories, laughter echoing where lies had lived. Neighbors whispered. My mother flew in from Enugu and refused to let me stay alone. One night, I caught her sitting by the window whispering, "God, you spared her." Don't let her lose her mind. But the truth is, I was losing my mind. Every time I looked at Toby, I wondered, did Kay ever truly love our son? Or was he just another piece of the plan? At work, people pretended not to talk. But their pity clung to me like humidity. Even Lara's desk stood empty, police tape sealing her locker. When I passed it, the air seemed colder. 3 days later, Detective Ebele called again. "Mrs. Adebanjo, we found something in your husband's email drafts." He never sent it, but it's enlightening. She forwarded it to me. The subject line read, "To my dear wife, after you're gone." I opened it. The first line made my knees weaken. "Nkechi, you were never meant to know. But life with you felt like drowning in responsibility. Bills, a crying baby, endless shifts. I needed freedom. Lara offered that. You offered survival. I'm sorry." I dropped the phone. Freedom. That was what my death meant to him. Freedom. That night, I packed every photo, every gift, every memory of him into a black trash bag and left it on the curb. The only thing I couldn't throw away was my wedding ring. Not yet, 2 weeks passed. Lara was denied bail. Kayode was transferred to Ikoyi prison pending trial. Then one morning, my hospital director called me in. "Nkechi," he began carefully, "there's been gossip. Some say you fabricated evidence to frame Kayode. He's claiming you installed the monitor illegally." I froze. What? He says you spied on him, violated his privacy, and made up the poisoning story because you were jealous. I laughed bitterly. Do they think I drugged myself too? He sighed. You know how society is. Just stay strong. We know the truth. But deep down, the humiliation burned. Kayode was trying to paint me as the villain. And in a country where women are blamed before they're believed, I knew how fast stories twisted. A week later, Ebele visited again, this time with a new expression, pity mixed with disgust. "Mrs. Adebanjo," she said, "you should sit." My stomach turned cold. What happened? We found footage on a neighbor's CCTV camera. Lara wasn't the only woman Kayode was seeing. He was sleeping with another one. And that woman was your cousin, Ifeoma. For a moment, the world tilted off its axis. Ifeoma? Yes, she's admitted it. She said he promised her marriage once the problem was out of the way. My blood boiled so fast I felt dizzy. He had poisoned me in spirit long before he ever tried to poison my body. Ifeoma came to the house 2 days later, uninvited. She stood at the gate, crying, clutching a Bible. "Sister Nkechi, please forgive me. I didn't know he'd go that far." "Don't call me sister," I said quietly. "Mummy made me come. I swear I didn't know he'd hurt you." My voice dropped low. "You slept with my husband, Ifeoma. You held my baby while doing it. You knew." She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back. "Leave before I forget I'm a Christian." Her tears didn't move me. Karma had begun its work. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Every night I felt watched, as if someone was standing outside the window just beyond the light. Then one night, my phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m., a text from an unknown number. "You think prison will save you? You destroyed the man I loved. I'll destroy you too." My blood ran cold. "Lara," I called Ebele immediately. She traced the message, confirmed it came from a contraband phone seized later that morning from Lara's cell. That was when Ebele told me something that made my skin crawl. Lara's father used to be a chief pathologist. He still has connections. She's not the type to go down quietly. I realized then, evil doesn't stop just because it's caught. It rots in the dark, waiting. 3 weeks later, the trial began. Kayode's lawyer argued the recordings were inadmissible, a violation of privacy. But the judge disagreed. When one's act involves plotting murder in the presence of a child, privacy is irrelevant. Kayode glared at me across the courtroom. For a split second, his charm cracked and something monstrous peeked through. When the audio was played, "She won't wake up. Toby can stay with my aunt." The courtroom went dead silent. Even the fans seemed to stop turning. That was the moment people finally believed. Lara fainted when the pharmacist's records were read. Kay just sat there, staring at me, his eyes empty. After court, Ebele walked me to my car. "You know, sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do. It's what you become after." I nodded. Then I'll become someone he can never break again. But I didn't know yet how deep that revenge would run. Because 2 weeks later, something happened that flipped everything again. Something even Ebele didn't see coming. The morning the verdict came felt like the first clean breath I'd had in a year. Outside the courthouse, Lagos pulsed in the ordinary way it always had. Hawkers calling, Okada riders weaving, a sun that could make concrete shimmer. Inside, the air smelled of paper and polished wood and old sweat. The judge entered like an unavoidable truth. I sat in the gallery with Toby on my lap. He was 5 now, chest still soft under his small shirt. He swung his legs back and forth, unaware that the words we were about to hear would carve pieces out of everyone in that room. Out of his memory of a father. Out of my chest. Out of Kayode's future. Prosecutor Mills stood and spoke with the kind of steady heat you can't learn in a classroom. She laid everything out. Audio, pharmacy logs, bank transfers, the draft email Kay never sent. She painted the picture of a man who had planned a future where his wife was a memory and his mistress was a passport. The evidence was dense, exact, merciless. When the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, a slow, incredulous wave rolled through the courtroom. Some people cried. Others stared like they'd just woken from anesthesia. I felt none of it. My face was numb, but my heart was a small, steady drum, learning to keep time again. Coyote's eyes met mine one last time before they cuffed him. For a moment, he looked smaller, not with fear, but with an animal's incredulous hurt, like someone who truly couldn't reconcile his reflection with the monster he'd become. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. After the verdict, the media storm softened but never truly left. Instagram accounts that had once rallied to defend him published his messages and photos with Lara. Call-in shows replayed the baby monitor audio until it felt like a ritual chant. People wrote to me, messages of solidarity, yes, but also shards from strangers who had faced betrayal and wanted to thank me for speaking out. Detective Ebeli stayed close through it all. She was not sentimental, but she smiled the first time she watched me comfort Toby and feel something that looked like light. "You did more than survive," she said one evening as we sat in a small, noisy restaurant near the court. "You turned your fear into evidence. That takes courage and intelligence." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it was just that I was too tired to be smart enough to die." She laughed then, a brief, startled sound like someone who hadn't allowed herself to loosen in months. The fallout reached further than the trial. Coyote's mother, who had stood by us when we were young and poor, had ironed his shirts, had said 1,000 times that a man was nothing without his family, published a statement on social media that read like a confession and an accusation at once. It said she had never known. It said she grieved. It also said something else in small print that the tabloids gleefully highlighted. She had signed custody transfers and property waivers on Coyote's behalf. Those documents, she claimed, were for business reasons. The banks froze accounts. Finance regulators opened inquiries. The house we had bought with the money Kay had siphoned away was placed under temporary receivership. The accountants found phantom companies and transfers to offshore entities. The auditors found forged invoices and falsified loan documents. Men in suits who had once called Kay a visionary suddenly avoided eye contact. Lara's fate was no kinder. The pharmacy board revoked her license after the investigation showed she had access to regulated substances and had obtained them under false pretenses. The hospital where she had worked fired her for gross misconduct. Her family, once protective, fell silent. In the weeks after her arrest, I learned that Lara had been fighting with her father, an influential man with a thin veneer of righteousness, over how to handle the scandal. There had always been a cost to loyalty in their family. The price was higher than any of them had judged. But the most unexpected turn came when I received an envelope, handwritten, no return address. Inside, grainy phone photos, Coyote signing papers in a small office, documents that had his name on top and my signature forged at the bottom. Bank transfer screenshots, a note on the back, scrawled and urgent. "If you want more, go to the file room behind the old municipal archive. Look under the third shelf. A friend." I almost didn't go. I thought of all the nights I had curled up on the sofa and whispered into a pillow, "I will not let him take everything." Not even the truth, so I went. The file room smelled of dust and wilted glue. The shelf was lower than it should have been. I crouched, reached with fingers that trembled, and pulled out an envelope with my name in Coyote's handwriting. Inside, the papers had been crudely forged, but the transfers were real, clear as water. It was the missing link the banks needed to freeze remaining assets, and the prosecutors needed to show pattern and intent. This anonymous tip had given me the leverage to finish unraveling the financial web. Who had left it? I never found out. Sometimes justice is a chorus. Sometimes it's a single voice that steps forward and becomes a tide. I chose not to ask. A few months after the trial, there was the hearing for my mother's death, the one that had turned our lullaby into a nightmare. The pathologist's testimony had been brutal and precise. Potassium chloride, administered in a way designed to mimic natural cardiac arrest. The prosecutor argued it was a test run, Coyote's learning exercise. The defense wanted to cast doubt. The pathologist's charts wanted to be believed. When Coyote was charged with my mother's murder, the courtroom felt, for a moment, like an altar on which every one of his lies burned. The verdict this time, guilty. People asked me how I could stand in court and relive those nights, how I could look at the man who had stripped me of my trust, my mother, my peace. The answer was simple and terrible. I had to tell the truth because if I didn't, my story would dissolve into rumor, and in that country, rumor eats survivors alive. Even after the legal victories, the ache of betrayal did not vanish. There were days I woke and felt the old, hollow fear crawling up my spine, that someone would take Toby, that someone would find a new cruelty to invent. I learned how fragile security could be. I learned how tedious the work of rebuilding trust is. So I built systems. I changed banks. I put a trust in place for Toby, managed by an independent legal firm in Abuja. I changed locks, passwords, numbers. I met with counselors regularly and learned how to say no in the softest voice I had. I taught Toby how to be cautious, how to recognize boundaries and speak his truth, without teaching him to fear the world. One evening, as dusk fell and Lagos pressed its humid forehead to the windows, I sat down to write. I wrote for myself at first, a journal, ragged and honest, then for others. The words needed to leave my chest. I began to write a column about surviving betrayal, about the long arithmetic of recovery. It was messy and true. People wrote back with their stories. A small community formed in the margins. There was, however, one last surprise the world had kept for me. About a year after the trials, my mother's case file was reopened by an investigative journalist I'd never met. He had a nose for the leftovers of corruption. Late one night, he came to my house with an envelope and a weary look that matched my own. Inside were emails, old, confident, ribboned with arrogance, correspondence between a man at the hospital procurement office and an unnamed vendor. The emails hinted at a scheme that predated Kayode's arrival, an old corruption ring. And in one rough line, someone with the initials LP thanked. Another for clearing the paperwork around a hospital. Visit. LP. The journalist had dug and found that those initials matched. The man who had been Kayode's mentor, someone who had advised him on smart investments, who had introduced him to shell companies. The journalist suggested that Kayode had not invented everything himself. He had learned it. He had a teacher. The revelation didn't change the sentences handed down in court, but it unspooled an ugly truth I had suspected. Corruption feeds on the willing and the desperate. It creates monsters and gives them masks. When I read the name out loud, my voice didn't tremble. I felt instead a cold, quiet clarity. People ask now if I forgave Kayode. They ask as if forgiveness is a coin to be handed over. I tell them this. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the person who hurt you. Forgiveness is a tool you sharpen for your own wrists so they stop hurting. I never forgave him for wanting me dead. I forgave myself slowly, each small mercy I allowed myself, each time I laughed and didn't feel guilty. Forgiveness of him was not reconciliation. It was the act of letting my life move forward without him as its governor. There was a moment years later when the story looped like a circle closing. I was at a public event, a forum I'd been invited to speak at about domestic abuse and financial exploitation. The hall was full of women and men who had survived things I had left unspoken. People clapped when I stepped up. Toby sat in the audience, older now, his small hand in my sister Tasha's. He looked at me as if I were just his mum, no heroism required. I told the room the truth, about the monitor that had saved my life, about the trials, about the slow, strange alchemy of grief into resolve. I told them about the anonymous friend who left the file room envelope. I told them about the banks and the trust and the nights I cried into a pillow. At the back of the room, a woman stood and told her own story. She'd been scammed by a man who promised to help her start a business. He'd used her documents and left her bankrupt. She had come to the forum to learn how to rebuild. When she finished, we were both quiet. Then she hugged me. It felt like a stitch. As people filed out and the lights came up, a man in a dark suit approached. He introduced himself as a social worker who had worked with prisoners, who believed in rehabilitation. He said he'd read my columns. He asked if I'd be willing to meet a few men in prison who wanted to change. For a second, the old rage inside me, the edge that wanted to see him lose, tightened like a fist. Then I remembered Emily's words, the way she had said, become. I thought about Toby and the kind of world I wanted him to inherit. A world where accountability existed and people could, if they truly chose, repair some part of the harm they'd done. I agreed. My first visit to the prison as a volunteer, months later, was a strange mixture of nausea and necessity. I walked in past razor wire and cell blocks and the hum of fluorescent lights. Men looked up from their benches. Some looked ashamed. Others looked like the men I had loved once. Handsome, easy, destroyed. Kayode was not among those I met that day. His time was locked away in paperwork and walls and the slow tick of days. But other men told stories of remorse and wanting to rebuild. They wanted to learn skills and make something of themselves. At the end of the program I helped set up, financial literacy and parenting classes, a former inmate came up to me and said, "I wish someone had taught me this before I hurt people." He wasn't Kayode. He was someone else. A different life ruined by a different choice. But the circle felt complete. I had been able to take my experience and temper it into fire that could warm others, not burn them. Sometimes on quiet nights, I still check the baby monitor app. Habit, not fear. Toby sleepwalks in his teens to the rhythm of distant games and homework. He's no longer a small man in a mosquito net. He is a person finding his feet. He calls me when he needs advice, when his heart is bruised by a girl who didn't mean to break him. He calls me and I answer. I remarried, slowly with paperwork and patience and long, honest conversations. My new husband is a man who knows how to listen. He knows that love, like the best of medicines, requires dosage and timing and consent. He knows that trust must be built brick by brick with consent as the mortar. Sometimes people ask about that, how you open your life again after someone tried to end it, and I tell them the truth. You don't open it all at once. You install better locks, yes, but also better windows that let light in without letting strangers see your whole house. Occasionally, someone online still sends a bitter message. You ruined his life, as if justice were a stain. I block them and return to work, and to Toby and to the small rituals of a life remade. Planting in my backyard, Sunday church. That's quiet and not performative. The way our new house smells like spices and second chances. There is a cruelty that some stories have. They make you feel that evil ends only with blood. Mine didn't. It ended with law, with exposure, with the precise work of people who would not let a lie stand. It ended with me writing, speaking, and teaching. It ended in slow repairs. On the anniversary of the day the police burst into my house, I sat on the step of my veranda and watched Toby play with his friends in the street. He kicked a soccer ball with reckless joy. The sun was sinking, orange and forgiving. I thought about the woman on the other end of that first call, Lara, now sitting in a smaller room, her license revoked, her life narrowed to a few hard days. I thought about Kayode, measured out in years and wire. Sometimes when the sky was very clear and the stars were loud like an audience, I imagined him behind glass, staring at the same sky and thinking of the life he had traded away. But I didn't hope for suffering. I hoped, with the small, steady hope that a person learns after trauma, for accountability and repair, not theatrical pain. On my phone, a notification popped up, a new comment on the column I'd written about rebuilding. I clicked and read one short line. Thank you. I left his house 2 days ago. I closed the phone and stood. The evening air smelled of mango and fried yams. I walked inside, washed my hands, and kissed Toby's forehead like I had the night I left for that shift so many years ago. Sleep tight, my son, I whispered. Mummy's here. He grinned sleepily and mumbled, always. Outside, Lagos hummed and the world did what it does, kept moving, kept breaking, kept healing in parts. And inside me, something finally felt anchored. The knowledge that I had survived not just because of a streaming camera, but because I had learned how to make truth louder than the lies that tried to drown me. If you felt this story hit home, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Every share helps survivors find each other.